Okay, welcome back to Shares for Beginners and introducing again our tame financial advisor, Simon Shepherd from Providence Advisory. Hi, welcome back.
Hi, Phil. Thanks for having me. Good to catch up again.
Yeah, it's great to catch up because I do use the term tame financial advisor advisedly, but in terms of, I think a lot of people, a lot of Australians in particular, don't understand what financial advisors do, what advice is, and what value is. And I'm not trying to sell you or sell the industry as a whole, but
hmm
it does have an important role to play at times, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, absolutely, absolutely. I think, it's such a complex area. Money is such an emotional topic. Um, there's a perception out there that people can't afford advice or they don't know how it works. As you say, we can explore that further shortly. But in one sentence, I would say what a good financial advisor does is actually a goal-setting process. At the end of the day, that's what it's about. About helping people set and achieve their goals, which is tied into money in the case of what we do for them. But it is really that simple.
Now, one of the criticisms leveled against the industry is the cost of it.
hmm
Can you explain why it costs so much to get a financial advice, and also what's the kind of threshold? How much money should people have before they start considering engaging a financial advisor?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll answer the second one first. I think the threshold idea and the how much money have you got question is a little bit antiquated. It probably comes from the days of when it was much more of a sales focused industry. So advice has never been free, but back in the day, very quick history lesson, financial advice was born out of the life insurance industry 20, 30 years ago. And life insurance gets paid by commission, right? Because people don't, buy life insurance, as the old saying goes, you have to sell it to them. And so to get paid, you'd sell a life policy, there'd be a commission built in. The value of the commission depend on the size of the policy. So I think the concept of how much money do you need to get advice was, well, I'll charge you X percent of your whatever, $200,000 in super that you want advice on, right? And you might end up with $2,000 or $3,000, so on and so forth. The way the industry has transformed to a lot more of a professional, what they call a fee for service approach, partly through maturity, partly through government nudging and regulation, is a lot more now like if you go to see a solicitor, an architect, an accountant, where let's pick the architect example, and you want them to do a project, which is my goal is I want to build this amazing house. Can you help me build a plan to do that, right? The architect will work out how much work is involved, probably spend some time with you to do that, and then give you a quote. Same thing happens now with financial advice. So it's less about the money that you have and more about what your needs are. What are those goals? How complex or simple is the work to help you figure out how to get those goals achieved? And then you sort of reverse engineer that. It might be 5, 10 hours, 15, 20 hours of the time of the advisor plus his support or her support team. And then you come up with a number. The industry benchmark at the moment is somewhere between about $3,000 and $5,000 for an initial piece of work, right? For that architect to go away and build that initial plan for you. Does that answer your question?
It does, but maybe
Yeah.
we should have a look at the statement of advice as well and what role that plays in the
Yep.
process.
Well, the crazy thing is, it's really that's an output of the regulatory view that this is the thing that protects the client. Um, in reality, it's the actions that come out of the statement of advice that are most important. A lot of the statement of advice in the old days, which was called a financial plan, is sort of boilerplate regulatory disclosure, right? Just pages and pages of things that there's a 1% chance this could happen. There's a 1% chance this could happen, and so they're kind of built by lawyers and regulators with the idea that it protects the consumer, the purchaser of financial advice. At the end of the day, a lot of it just goes, in the filing cabinet. But that's just the way the industry is at the moment. And so the cost to produce that, unfortunately, is a lot of work, even though some of it's templated. Of course, advice is customized, but those sort of standard disclosures are templated. And the objective of the document is to protect the client, right? To cover all possible scenarios. And that's what the statement of advice is. As I said, the most important thing is actually the strategy and the steps that come out of the statement of advice. And the idea is that a client has a really clear picture of what they need to do in order to achieve the goals that they've set out with their advisor. Does that make answer that one a bit
It does. It
clearer?
does.
Yeah.
You haven't answered the threshold, how much money you need
Okay.
question.
Thank you.
But before we
Yeah.
do that, I just wanted to, with the statement of advice, what I find interesting, the part of it is where there's a risk assessment, how you
Mm-hmm.
can assess the risk of a person that wants to take the financial advice. How useful do you think it is? Because it's very different sitting there in an office being asked a set of questions to
Mm-hmm.
how you would actually react to risk in the case of, the market going through one of its ructions. They're completely different things. Do you think it actually helps protect people, or
Look,
is it just a process of making them aware of what they should be thinking about?
I think it's the best that we have at our disposal. Yeah, you cannot replicate. These are sort of laboratory conditions, right? As you say, um, you can have those conversations about how would you feel if X, Y, Z happened, and it's usually a market crash because that's where people tend to abandon their plans when things aren't going well, at least on paper. So it does serve a purpose. It's not perfect. The trick is in, I think, the trust factor. If and when those events happen, there's two things that have to happen with the client. One is they have to trust in the plan and that they've invested the time and energy to build, and sticking with it. And two, they have to trust in the advisor to help them to stay on track with that plan. And I think they're the things that will more likely guarantee a successful outcome. Nothing's perfect. There's always going to be some people that won't be able to stick with it, right? Again, that's human nature. So it isn't perfect, but I think it's better than nothing at all. The technology is improving. That some of the surveys now are a bit more gamified. You've got sort of sliders and different things you can play around with scenarios in a live environment, so to speak, like a lab but a live environment versus an old ticker box kind of form. So it's evolving and it's getting better. And they try to bring more of that, investor psychology and behavioral influences, maybe not explicitly, but they try to build that into these algorithms and the questionnaire. So it is improving, but yeah, you can't replicate actual real life when it does happen. That's why the plan's important, and the trust in the plan, and the trust in the guy or girl that wrote the plan for you.
Okay, and getting back to the threshold, the financial threshold, how much
Yep.
how much dosh do people need?
I think, broadly speaking, probably anywhere from sort of 200,000 to 300,000 in assets would be a starting point from what we see out there for the cost of the advice, or at least the initial project or plan, to become value or economical. There are exceptions, of course, but broadly speaking, that'd be a starting point. Maybe if it's a couple 300,000, if it's an individual 200,000, etc. But there's so many variables that go behind that, from that point. So it's kind of it's a very crude answer, but I'm giving you an answer. So yeah, that would be a rough guide.
I just wanted to point out, if you go to the Money Smart website where they talk about getting a financial advice,
Yeah.
I wouldn't advise people going to the Money Smart website to find out about learning about financial advice, because they give this case study of Daniel, who's got $400,000 to invest, and he goes to a financial advisor. And it's kind of like in the first year, it points out that he's going to be paying $16,000 or something. My figures aren't correct because this is from memory.
Loosely, yeah.
But it was just so distant from reality, from my experience. Anyway, that's just a little aside about that. But the other thing about financial advice, and there's that moment when many people retire. And there's a lot of people who retire. They've got their superannuation, they've got their home, whatever their assets are, and they will just get a very simple set of advice from their superannuation provider, who will put them into an income stream. Whereas a financial advisor is going to be looking at things a little bit more, I hate the word holistically, because I think that's been overused, but take a broader view of what their needs might be.
That's right.
What are your thoughts for people reaching this point in their lives?
Well, that's a classic example of a need for some form of advice, and the government's very aware of that, and they're trying to, um, get super funds more active for their members at that point, right, and develop better products and better projections and tools. And there's a lot of DIY stuff on most of. If you go to your super fund website, they'll have those basic calculators. So I think it again comes down to one's individual circumstances, how simple or complex your situation is. And even then, carving that down again, you may not have a lot of money, but you may just feel like you want someone on that journey with you and you're prepared to pay for that and you see value in that. Whereas there's the other extreme where, yeah, I've retired, I've got whatever, 300,000 in my super. Australian Super is recommending I do a choice income, which is this is just not a recommendation, just an example, case study, recommending that I, start an income stream, which they call choice income. That's their product name. And that sounds fine to me. And I don't think I need anything else than that, right? But there might be the same couple or husband or wife that's like, look, I want to help my kids while I'm still alive, but I don't want to run down my retirement savings too much. I don't want to impact my Centrelink entitlements when I'm pension age. There's a few moving parts there, right? Most people couldn't answer that. So I'm going to go and see an advisor. So same amount of money, but two different complete situations because their personal objectives tied into their money objectives are different. So that's what it comes down to, right? Everybody's different. Yeah, there are some common overlaps. Everybody retires at some point. Everybody or most people have some super these days. That's only going to improve over time with the history of super. And then from that point, there's so many different pathways. So it just depends on what you need as an individual.
So let's talk about fees.
Mm-hmm.
There's three different aspects of fees in financial advice, aren't there? Tell us about those three and what they mean, because I think sometimes people get their statement and go, they haven't got a clue what those fees are and what they're for.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess from an advice standpoint, there's two direct fees that an advisor would be paid, and if you take it back to maybe again building a house analogy versus maintaining the house, there's an initial project fee or initial plan fee. And that's usually negotiated up front. In our case, we guarantee it with our clients so that, if we run over, they don't get another bill. Having said that, you try to spend as much time as you can for the benefit of both sides to really understand what is it that you want to do, what is it you think you need us to help you with, and what are the costs and benefits of doing so. So that's the initial plan fee or statement of advice is what culminates from that. But it's, again, the important thing is what are the strategies and steps to take? That's the output from that to get you started. And then the other fees that an advisor will charge, if after that initial plan is done, so again, the house has been built, you're in this brand spanking new house or renovation, the ongoing relationship, right? So some people are happy just to do that one piece and go off and do it themselves. Others want an ongoing relationship. And so that might be, someone's coming into the house every year and, checking the gas, doing the, repairs, the maintenance, fixing up those bits and pieces that maybe have just from the initial build, need tweaking or adjusting, repairing, modifying, so on and so forth. And that's what you call an ongoing service fee or an ongoing, advisor fee, etc. And so as to how much that is and what's involved, it gets back to how simple or complex your needs are. You live in a 5-bedroom house with a swimming pool and a sauna versus a 2-bedroom duplex. They're going to have different maintenance needs. There's going to be things that can go wrong in the bigger house more often than the smaller house, right? So an analogy transferred across to financial planning might be someone might have a self-managed super fund, a family trust, a corporate entity versus someone might have one account with Australian Super or HESTA, but still have certain needs. So there's the initial plan or project fee, and then there's the ongoing. A good practice, in my view, won't necessarily not take clients if they only want single scope advice or that one piece of work, because you can still do a great job for somebody and help them. And that, to me, as a professional, is the most important thing. So they're the two advice fees. Outside of that, the other set of fees is if you're investing your money somewhere, somebody has to do that work. Somebody does that, right? Unless you stick your money in the bank. And we, again, without going to investing lesson, in most cases, putting all your money in the bank for the next 30 years of your retirement is a very bad idea because inflation's going to chew away at the value of that money, right? That you won't keep up with cost of living. So whether it's again an industry fund, running your own self-managed fund, somewhere in between, you might own some ETFs, you might own a managed fund. You have to pay somebody to make those investment decisions, to take your capital, diversify it, spread it across numerous investments. We know how important diversification is. And so that's the investment cost. There's different industry terminology like a management expense ratio, an indirect cost ratio, but basically there's a cost to do that. And that is anywhere from usually these days about a 0.3 or 0.4% up to about a 0.8 of 1%. So for every, $100,000, it might be, $400 to $800 in investment costs. And so that's sort of the third fee, if you will, that's bundled together. So, broadly speaking, the benchmark that we try to look for is if a client is on ongoing service, and they might have a portfolio of whatever, 500,000 that we're managing for them, among other things as well. It might be the estate planning, maximising their government entitlements, etc. Sort of the ballpark is sort of the benchmark, maybe about a 0.9 to maybe a 1.2% range. So somewhere like $5,000 to $6,000 in ongoing costs for that kind of package. Again, as a very rough guide, right? So does that help answer the question a bit?
It does, except for the wrap fee. There's a wrap fee as well, isn't there?
Yeah, look, I didn't want to overcomplicate the answer, but that's right. So in my 0.4 to 0.8% for the investment costs, if you're that will often include an admin fee as well, or a wrap fee, as you say. So for the benefit of listeners, a wrapper service is like an investment portal. If you have an online broking account, that's a bit of an example of how a wrapper works. The difference is a wrapper lets you it's a super fund, right? So you outsource the functions. This is if you don't run your own super, and they charge a fee for that. So most of the big banks run them, and it's just a way for you to invest, but invest in the structure of super, or invest in the structure of an allocated pension, which is what your super turns into for most people when they retire and they want an automatic payment coming out tax-free every month, or whatever they like in terms of frequency. So you would hope that 0.4 to 0.8 that I quoted, and thanks for asking me, because that is part of it. It includes that admin or that wrap fee as well. And so where the confusion comes is different products and different providers call it different things. Industry super funds tend to bundle it together or only have a very small sort of admin fee. Commercial or public offer master trust, like something run by a Colonial or a Macquarie Wrap, whatever, Asgard, they have a separate managed investment fee and an admin fee. The reason is they separate those two functions, right? So the investment will be outsourced, and what the wrapper allows you to do is select from a menu of either individual funds, right? Fidelity Australian Equity Fund, not a recommendation, just an example, or I want to own, 10 of the blue chip stocks in the Australian stock market, and maybe some international exchange traded funds, right? So that's one fee. That's the investment cost, because again, you've got to pay somebody, apart from the direct shares, to manage that money for you. And then if it's wrapped up in the super structure, because remember, super is just a tax structure, right? So if you don't run your own fund, somebody's got to run that for you, and they have to cover their costs. And so historically the most cost-effective are industry super funds for doing that. When you wrap's not the right word, when you bundle it all together. But these days they're converging. So a lot of the retail master trust styles are pretty much on par with the industry super. That's part of that fee. It is. There's a lot to think about. That's for sure.
It sure is. I just like listeners to understand what's going on.
Great question.
What all of these mean. Okay, so let's just wrap it up. I mean, so to speak, wrap it up. A story a friend of mine told me a few years ago when he engaged a financial planner, and it's been a very successful relationship.
Pleased to hear.
And that his daughters inherited some money, and the financial planner was able to package the money so that it was in their names, but it was almost untouchable. So even if they ended up in a dodgy relationship in the future, they wouldn't lose all their money. And this is just one example of the kind of expertise that financial advisors can provide, isn't it?
That's exactly right. And the common perception is just about wealth creation or investing, but there are so many different variables in people's lives that financially can impact them. And that's a good example with a relationship breakdown and mum and dad leaving an inheritance to their kids. And that's what we see, right, with our clients. Great example. The thing that keeps them up most at night, or one of, is when they're gone. And if we're talking about Sydney, where I'm operating from, the average house price is whatever, $1.2 million. Even for just a run-of-the-mill family, that's a big inheritance for kids, if there's two kids. So the fear is that, when the last of mum or dad has gone, that the kids inherit $500,000, $1 million, and they get in a relationship breakdown or some kind of financial trouble. And that inheritance just gets diluted, right, by the ex-spouse walking off with some of that money. So the more property prices grow, the more people's wealth tends to increase, the more there is need and advice for not just, we're going to help you grow your super or manage it in a sustainable way for the next 30 years of your life if you're retiring, but also protect you against some of those other things, right? Or the government getting more than they're entitled to, and again, I mean legitimately, legitimate tax minimization, or you missing out on what you should be entitled to, right? The seniors health card or the pensioner concession card, or the kids making sure that they're getting as much of the estate as they can in the most protective way possible. So there's all those different moving parts outside of just, we'll invest that money for you. And that's the profession, right? That's what it does. It's advice. It isn't just the investment piece.
Okay, Simon, how can viewers find out more about you and your practice if they want to make make contact?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess I'll finish with maybe, do I have time for top 5 tips for people looking at advisors, or you just move on to let them contact me directly? How are we for time?
Well, we're on the 20-minute mark, and I wanted to keep these. Maybe we could do another video at some stage about those top 5 tips.
Yeah, good idea to come back and have another chat. In the meantime, if anybody would like to get in touch,
hang on a sec. Sorry, I was talking. Hold on.
In the meantime, if anybody would like to get in touch with me, this is our brand here, Providence Advisory Group. Website, you can book a free call. There's a button on our landing page, providencegroup.com.au. Big red button on the top, book a free call. Love to see if I could to help you and answer any questions you might have. So that'd be a great first step.
Okay. I think it's great, and I think that's what we need in this anyway. It always makes a good headline. Top 5 tips for choosing a financial advisor.
You bet.
Okay, here we go. So, Simon, I believe you've got some tips, your top 5 tips for choosing a financial advisor. Take us through those.
I think, thanks, Phil. So the top 5 I would suggest to think about. The first is, know your goals before you go, right? So as I said at the start of our chat, our role is really about goal setting and goal achievement. So know your goals before you go see anybody. Ask how your advisor gets paid. That's really important. Transparency is probably trumps the actual amount of the fee. Understand what goes in that mix and how it's arrived at. Don't wait until you're wealthy. As you know, again, to our previous conversations about I don't have enough money or there's that perception. Our role is to build wealth, to get you on that journey, not just manage it, right? And that's the compounding benefit as well. The sooner you make those changes, those habits, form those habits over time, it snowballs. So don't wait till you're wealthy. Number 4 is check for independence or product affiliation. So, just be careful if you see, and I use a real life example, Dixon's Advisory, has been in the news. They used to flog a lot of their in-house products to their clients. Some of those funds one of the funds was a US property fund. Investors got their money frozen. Point being, those kind of things are potentially red flags, right? So you want to find an advisor that only does advice. We don't sell you investment products. We don't sell you structures, etc. So check for independence and any product affiliation. Number 5, trust your gut during that initial meeting as well. If you're feeling pressured or sold to, probably not the people you want to deal with. So that'd be a great starting process when you go and talk to anybody, and see if we can help.